Good afternoon and welcome to our Women's Futures Month Roundtable presented by Scholas Diverse by Design and Enterprise Talent Solutions. I am your host, Omoanatse McCarther, Senior Director of Scholas Diverse by Design, and I'm excited about today's discussion, and I hope you are too. Scholas Diverse by Design is the preeminent leadership resource in how to deliver and retain diverse technology talent. We underscore the importance of action through data, insights, and partnership to improve the tech industry, leading to increased innovation, greater productivity, higher retention, improved decision-making, and better business outcomes. According to the latest research from Boston Consulting Group, diversity is a key driver of innovation, finding that diverse teams produce a minimum of 19% more revenue. We know that the war for tech talent continues despite the headlines about nationwide layoffs. For Scholas Enterprise Talent Solutions helps companies not only find the new talent that they need, but upskill or reskill the talent that they already have. Nearly every single company in America is in need of tech talent. Talent resourcing is no longer a luxury, but a competitive advantage for our nation's employers, from blue chip companies to innovative startups, financial institutions to healthcare providers, and more. At Scholas, we're in the business of unlocking potential and changing the face of tech. That's why this Women's History Month, we're celebrating the contributions of women technologists from past to present. I'm proud to share that in 2022 alone, we trained 1,545 women technologists for high growth careers. That's 1,545 strong women futures created, contributing to their company's bottom line and their local communities. But so much more needs to be done. Today, women in technology sectors continue to hover around 27% of workers nationwide, according to the latest from AnitaB.org. Clearly, the barriers to entry and retention challenges remain for women technologists and collectively. What's even more dismaying to me is that only 4% of women technologists nationwide are women of color. This is why I'm confident that today's Women's Futures Month Roundtable will bring to light best practices, strategies, and solutions to create more women tech futures. And that brings me to our guests. I'm honored to be joined by a group of extraordinary women executives for this dynamic roundtable conversation. Please join me in welcoming Rashida Ricks, Vice President of Strategic Engagement and Inclusion at CGI Federal. Rashida is responsible for integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion into CGI Federal strategic vision, planning, and implementation initiatives. With a career spanning over 20 years, Rashida leverages her personal lived experience as an IT executive and DEIA champion. Thank you for being here, Rashida. Next, we have Maria Medrano, CEO and co-founder of Inspirame. Maria is a global bilingual Latina leader who has made a name for herself with exceptional track records in managing multi-million to billion-dollar businesses with a focus on bottom-line growth, large-scale project plans, data-driven decision-making, and strategic partnerships. Welcome to you, Maria. And lastly, I'd like to welcome Jamie Feldman to our virtual stage. Jamie is the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Talent Solutions at Scholas, and over the past 15 years, she has provided transformational service offerings within the private and public sectors. As a sales executive, she develops solutions that not only solve the problem in the moment, but adapt to solve problems and scenarios that may occur in the future. Thanks for being here, Jamie, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. There is so much emphasis placed on big titles, but I realized that some of the most inspirational women in my life did not hold a big corporate title. So for example, my grandmother was the most inspirational woman in my life. She only had an 8th grade education, yet she was the smartest person I've ever known. She had so many skills, from owning a store, driving big rigs and buses. She could deliver babies. She was known for writing reports for specific organizations, fundraising, agriculture. She built her own tools and even made her own herbal remedies to treat mild and severe illnesses, among so many other talents. Rashida, let's turn to you. Who was someone who inspired you that may or may not have a title?
Thanks, Omoanatse. First, I want to say that there's so many different women that inspire me every day, including all of you that are on this panel. But I will say that the number one inspiration for me is my mom. And so just a little backstory. So she grew up in the 50s and the 60s when most women in her neighborhood were going to school to learn how to type and become secretaries. And my mom really wanted to go to college and get a degree and do something different. And my grandfather wasn't as supportive with her going to college, not as supportive as he was with my uncles, right? It was just a different time, and so due to her academic excellence in high school, she was able to get a 4-year degree to Cheney University, which is actually, I believe, it's the first Black. Historically Black institution in the United States. And so she got not only her 4-year degree, she ended up also receiving her master's degree in education. So she did what she needed to do. And so I would say, like, this throughout my entire life, the strength and the resilience that I saw in my mom is really the core of who I am today. And so even as a single mother to me and my sister, she's always been optimistic, and even though she might not always understand our dreams or where we're trying to go, she's always our biggest champion. I wouldn't even be surprised if she's on the call today. But no, and so in addition to all that, she just has a really a very strong entrepreneurial spirit as well. And so once my younger sister went off to college, she actually changed careers at 50. And then she changed her career again at 65, right? And so she's always open to new opportunities and is always willing to take a risk and a chance on something new. And so she's just always inspires me. So.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Maria, who's someone who inspired you?
I'm going to go with the same theme, but before I go there, just good day to everybody. And I'm just so excited to be on this panel with all of you today. And it's just that moment, right? That moment in the day that just gives us some time to kind of think and reflect. And through that reflection, we get to learn and connect. So I'm just really grateful for that opportunity. My mom had me when she was 16. My mom was an orphan. And so when we talk about being resilient and giving all to, someone that you don't even know, but that you love so much, that's what she did. We were very, very poor. We came from very, very humble beginnings, but I can tell you that she was my biggest champion. She didn't see much for herself, but she told me I could become whatever I wanted to be. And she was my biggest supporter. And time again, that was proven in in regards to her telling me that there was nothing more that I couldn't conquer. And I remember her always making me feel that I could convince and do anything on this earth. And I use the past tense because unfortunately I lost my mom very unexpectedly 2 years ago. We were always supposed to be little old ladies together. We always talked about that, right? She was 59 years young. But the moment that she passed, I realized just how strong and how much more important she was in the fact of how weak I felt the moment that she was not on this earth, and thinking how strong she was to raise me, give me so much confidence when she didn't have that support growing up. So it just spoke to just her own internal strength. She wanted to see for myself to ensure that I knew that no matter what happened, that I could be sound and contribute in this world in a way that would be trifold, right, from a generational perspective. So she has always been my biggest inspiration, but more so now it's even greater because I get this opportunity to kind of reflect and really think about what is the purpose and the intent of the time we have on this earth. And it really resonates back to what she taught me in that time, and how you really are here to make others feel, to ensure that they have an opportunity to bring their gifts to life. So she taught me the biggest lesson that I feel I needed to have in this world.
Oh, thank you, Maria. That was powerful. Yes, thank you. Jamie, who was someone who inspired you?
Absolutely. I'm certainly going to continue with this theme, but just want to take a moment to acknowledge these amazing women in this conversation, and just the amazing women in my life that have been with me through all the different stages, professionally, personally, and I'm just so grateful for that community. I am going to say that my greatest and biggest inspiration is actually my grandmother, who came from a very small rural farm in Puerto Rico, was extremely poor and started with very humble beginnings, had 6 children of her own, but probably raised an additional dozen that were not her own. She had was part of the first wave of Puerto Ricans to come to New York in the 60s, and she landed in the projects in New York in a 1-bedroom apartment with 6 of her kids, not knowing the language, and was determined that her children would have a better future. And obviously one of her children was my mother, right? And so what was really so important and stressed throughout my childhood, my adulthood, was education, knowledge, being able to absorb as much as you can to grow yourself, because you are capable of everything. She had an 8th grade education. She, was not fluent in English, but she tried to ensure and instill this quality in each one of us. And I'm proud to say I'm first generation college graduate amongst my family. And it's just a powerful testament to the power of these women, these matriarchs within our family.
Thank you for sharing that, Jamie. Yes, I hear the common thread here from grandmothers and mothers. And I thank you guys for sharing who's been inspirational in your life. It sounds like each one of us are a part of a greater legacy that those who were before us in our own families created. So just like when you're creating a legacy, we know that the women who we've named today overcame many obstacles, and we know there's still obstacles that women face within their careers. What did you feel were your biggest challenges or obstacles that you faced as women in your industry, and how did you overcome them? Maria, what would you say was some of your biggest challenges?
A few of my, there was many challenges, but I would say from my experience, it was multidimensional, right? Similar to Jamie, I was the first in my family to have graduated from high school and gone to college. So I was clearly the first to break into corporate America. And I've spent the last 22 years in the high tech industry. So there's not many women to begin with when we think about that industry. And there's not many women of color when we think about the experience. So for me, when I look back, I think of the biggest challenge was not really knowing what to expect and how to hold the company responsible for the culture they should be creating to ensure that I could bring my full self to the organization. I was always often the only Latina on a team, much less the only Latina on a leadership team. So lots of feedback around, you're too ambitious, slow down, don't be curious about all what's going on, just focus on your work. When for me, it's like, I was just trying to connect the dots, like trying to understand what I'm doing here, how does it connect here? Because I wasn't in that environment every single day. I didn't grow up in that environment where many of my peers had. So I would say that the biggest challenge was just the unknown. And then feeling very lonely in many cases because you don't have a safe space to ask questions. And when you come from a first generation background, at least a Latina household, you don't want to be asking so many questions because that may look like you just don't know what you're doing, or it looks like it's weakness. And so even being able to find that support system inside of an organization was one of the hardest things, because I found that as I continued to grow in my career and the time continued to pass, it got easier and easier. But that's because my relationships expanded, my network, people can speak for the work that I was doing. And that time, well, you can't get it back, right? I think about this now with my own daughter who's 20 years old and going through her career, or mentees that I mentor in the conversations about what they want to do. And I'm telling them, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I can see their eyes just like, what do you mean? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, let me put myself back to where I was when I was at your age. That's the real issues that are still being faced today, is that lack of support, how you ensure that you create that community to really support the individual. Because at the end of the day, it's not the job, and I'm a firm believer, it's not the job, it's most likely the culture, it's most likely the environment that really makes it very difficult. And it's very similar to when we think about this in the education. It's not the difficulty of getting through school and learning what you need to learn. It's the support system around and the clarity. And when I think about the women, especially from my own personal experience, those are the biggest challenges. And I had to figure it out. And when I think about who I am today and how I've gotten to where I am today, it's because I was very proactive and I was very insistent on being the first. And if I had worked that darn hard to break that cycle of poverty, I was going to continue to work hard to make sure that I fit in and that I learned, how to establish those relationships.
Oh, very strong, Maria. Thank you. Relationship building. Jamie, what would you say are some challenges you faced in your industry on your journey?
Well, Maria touched on a lot. Obviously, we have some similarities in our background. I've spent the majority of my career in technology, and I've pretty much been the only Latina at the table in leadership positions. And I think to her point of not having that roadmap outlined, in a way where I could actually navigate the milestones because somebody else has gone through it. It was me creating that roadmap and learning from my failures, learning from my successes, understanding that I had to overcome systematic stereotypes that is embedded within organizations' culture that range from pay equity, that range from opportunities for growth within the organization. There's so many areas that are constantly put in front of you as an obstacle, as a hurdle, as you're building your career. And when you have ambitions, what you do is you find a way, right? You find that pathway to make it happen. No is not an answer. So you create that community, you make yourself vulnerable, you begin to tap into other individuals inside the organization, outside of the organization. Again, it's that expansion of knowledge that I think really has just given me an opportunity to fight those fights in the moment and become energized by the wins. And I'm so grateful for those opportunities, because to Maria's point, as I speak with women that I mentor, women within my community that I know right now are in university and looking, to enter into the workforce, you're able to give them those, advices, the insight, but you're also able to humble yourself and remember, what was it like to be in those shoes, to be, entering into the unknown. So very much resonate with what Maria's comments were.
Thank you, Jamie, for sharing that. Rashida, can you share some of your challenges or obstacles that you may have faced?
Sure, yes, very similar, to Maria and Jamie, and I think it was Maria that said, not having that roadmap to navigate through, right? And so when you're the only or one of a few, and most of the environments, because I've been in the IT industry for my entire career, and coming through as a computer engineer, there definitely weren't a lot of people that looked like me. And then once I actually started in corporate America, I didn't have nobody in my family really had the corporate American experience, right? And so I had to learn how to navigate. And early on, I had to learn how to advocate for myself, right? When it comes to, like Jamie was saying, pay equity or career progression and things like that. I had to do that early on in my career. And I didn't know, at the time, maybe how powerful it can be to, kind of just stand up for yourself and have that conversation with managers and once I recognized, there were cases when it was very clear, like I was making 15% less than a colleague, where not only did we have the same roles, similar title, but I was doing a little bit more. Maybe I was also training people at the same time. And so having to do that same thing, with advancing their career. But I will say with all of that, the other piece too that I found challenging was to really lean into my authenticity, right? Because showing up, right? That people say show up, come to work as your whole self, that's tough, right? And there's all kinds of thoughts that go, in your head, and you're like, can I say this? Should I say this? If I react this way, how will I be perceived? But, and so learning how to navigate and do that, I still, struggle with it sometimes, because that's just who we are. But I think figuring out that my voice is important and needs to be heard. And there's a lot of things that I do and that others can learn from and identify with. And so being able to just show up and be who I am has been very powerful for me.
Thank you. I find everything you all said to be very helpful, and for those who are listening as well, because I do find, as being a woman in a workplace, I always tell people some of the ships are missing, like the mentorships, the apprenticeships. So hearing that you all are doing those things is very helpful. And then, of course, just showing up as yourself, you guys are giving people a representation of who could also fill those shoes one day, right? Knowing that they can see themselves in each of you, I think is very powerful too. So I love learning about each of your experiences, and thank you for that. How would you encourage women to use their voices? I'd love to learn more about your approach at your own company or personal initiatives that are impacting fellow women. Jamie, can we hear from you first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think community is really important. I think connection is really important. I think having, of course, your own individual voice is critical to Rashida's point in terms of your authenticity, right? Really bringing that self to your workplace every day. But you need a community. You need a trusted space in which you can all have your voices heard, all have your voices really responded to in a way that feels safe and intentional. So absolutely recommend, find your tribe. Do not hesitate to reach out coldly to individuals, connect, introduce yourself, really create that bond that I think is so necessary to elevate and accelerate your own individual voice. And also, I mean, be bold, right? Be provocative. Why not? It's that point in time where, we have we've come a long way, but we have a long way to come. And so I certainly like to be disruptive, right? Have that moment where you are challenging the status quo and you're bringing your voice into that conversation with that impact. Another thing that comes to mind is always be solutions oriented. When you are introducing your voice and you are introducing your ideas, think about it from a proactive, solutions oriented way. And really, start challenging your mind to think like that at all times. It brings, so much opportunity for growth and for development.
Thank you, Jamie. I like that. To find your tribe, that really resonates. In the past, I've told people, if there's not an employee resource group that you feel like you can fit in, start one. Like, you'd be surprised at who might be longing to be a part of something and just wanting to have that sounding board. I agree, definitely. Thank you. Rashida, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I took that as a note too. Find your tribe. I love that. Finding your community. So I want to share a Maya Angelou quote. I love Maya Angelou. And so that, when I think about this question, it resonates. And that quote is, each time a woman stands up for herself without knowing it, possibly without claiming it, she stands up for all women. And so there's a theme here with me today. But, and standing in your truth and really embracing who you are, and that's something that I encourage myself, but then others as well that I interact, with at work and friends and things. It's just embracing who you are and figure out how you can bring that to work.
Absolutely.
Right? Figure out like what are your core strengths, not just your technical and business expertise, but who are you as a person, right? Like I'm naturally a relator and a connector and a problem solver, right? And so I always figure out how to incorporate that into, because that's what gets me excited about the things that I do. But then, figure out what those things are and what you're passionate about. And I say like, use that as your anchor and how you show up as a business leader. And being a business leader, I don't look at that as it automatically comes with a certain title, right?
Yeah.
You can lead from where you are in many ways, and I encourage people to be curious, ask questions, learn about different parts of the business, learn about your colleagues and your clients and what motivates them, right? Because the more that you do that, and the more you become this like trusted advisor in helping solve problems, the more people are going to just naturally gravitate to you to seek out your expertise or your insights. And so I say, so that's my perspective in figuring out how you can, use your voice at any level.
Thank you. I like that. That's a good takeaway. I love Maya Angelou, by the way, as well. I don't think she said anything bad her whole career. Maria, what would you say your approach at your company or your personal initiatives are around women finding their voice?
So I think the order of how we answer these questions is perfectly aligned. The universe works in our favor because I take both from what Jamie said and Rashida said. They're absolutely what I focus on, as well as knowing your tribe and having your community, but also standing in your own power, right? I'm the firm believer of always have a point of view. Always have a point of view in whatever conversation or wherever you are. And what I like to tell people is also always be consistent. Like don't be shy about showing up and ensuring that you show up in a way where folks know why you're there. Like it's like, of course Maria would be here, right? Of course Rashida would be, of course we would be here. Like what are those things that really speak to who you are? Because what I've learned over the last 2 decades is life is short. And we want to be spending our time in things that we know we're super passionate about that are going to drive change and impact, because we know there's lots to be changed and improved in our world. And so when I think about how you use that voice, is be very intentional with point of view, intentional with your approach, be consistent, be reliable, because the other piece is what Rashida has said as well, is reaching out to those in organizations, right? Your organizations that are sitting in positions of power that I'm telling you most likely are very shy about wanting to have a point of view or don't even know how to have a point of view in a particular topic. And you brokering that opportunity for them to learn and be a little bit more proximate creates additional voices in the room that actually helps you move whatever your challenge is or whatever your commitment is forward. And I think that's how I've been able to cope in being in the high tech industry for the last 2 decades, is really being the person that stands up to be able to raise their hand and say, hey, let's get to know each other. And again, these are people that don't look nothing like me, that have never, ever have spent time in even neighborhoods or communities that I've spent time in. But that's my power now. It's like, that's what differentiates me. You're actually you're going to have a great time getting to know me as a result of that. And I bring that type of enthusiasm and excitement to any conversation now. And when I think back to where I've been the last 20 years, that's who I am. I think I've brought in that little small element, probably in small increments, because I was building my confidence and really building my intention around what I wanted my time on this earth to be about. But now it's all out. Like there's no time to waste. Let's have these conversations. Let's get together. Let's drive a movement. Let's drive a conversation. What are we trying to get done? And then doing it in community, but also understanding that you have that point of view that you can lead, but you can also lead from behind, and you can lead from any area. And that's really how I think about this question.
I like that, Maria. It's like you're saying it's okay to be the spark, to drive those things. So thank you for that. If we had to build on our last question, I would ask, how can we support other women in the corporate world so that we're not perpetuating negative narratives about other women? So Rashida, how are you supporting women in the workspace with those positive narratives that we can create?
So yeah, so definitely, helping create communities, right? And employee resource groups are a big deal for us at CGI, and
Mm.
even in particular our women's networks here in the U.S. But then we also have a global network as well. And so, but within those networks and across our ERGs, we focus on intersectionality, right? The intersections of various dimensions, because you can be a woman, you can be, a caregiver. I'm a Black woman, right, or a Latina, or you could be from the LGBTQ plus community, or you can have a disability, right? There's all these different intersections, and it's important, I feel like, for us to look at that and listen and understand what the needs are of an individual, right? Because what you need in terms of mentoring, coaching, or development to thrive could look different depending on, you know, the intersections across your different, dimensions, but also where you are in your career and life phases, right, as well. Because what I needed when I was an early career professional looks different as a corporate executive. And so having those communities and places and spaces and a tribe of people that you can reach out to, I feel like is very important. And so I try to support and I might identify with certain communities, but then I also am an ally for other communities. And so I do mentor a lot internally and externally. I do a lot with STEM and helping, develop, the younger generation coming through, that's going to be coming in next. And so I would say too, just understanding that, and also understanding the cultural differences of people in different with different backgrounds as well. And having those groups like the ERGs and things like that has been really helpful for us at CGI. And I see the culture shift happening within the company. And we're just really trying to get to a place where more people feel like they belong. And actually, we had a couple of our senior executives say that they're starting to feel that. And so,
Oh, yay.
so I really do encourage, having those and supporting those employee resource groups as well. That's important as well.
Oh, no, thank you. I like that. Just like Maria mentioned as well, and you mentioned mentoring. I think that is such a key element and a big way to support women in the workplace. Maria, would you say that there was something additional to mentoring that you're doing in the workplace that is supporting women?
Yeah, absolutely. And Rashida, +1 to ERGs. They were a huge, huge differentiator in my career. I've always been a strong proponent from participating to also being an executive sponsor. I think they have a big role to play in what we're doing to retain talent and progress talent and really ensure that you give a safe space for folks to actually grow skills, especially if they want to do career changes. So just a little quick plug in there, because I think that ERGs are not, that's probably a different topic. Like I said, there's so much opportunity that organizations can actually do to help ensure their culture is thriving. But going back to the question on this piece is from a mentorship perspective, going back to what I said earlier, right? Those relationships. From my perspective, is I'm constantly making myself available, right? And I've been told you make yourself too available, but I push back and I said, actually, that's what I'd love to do, because I know that the availability is reciprocal. I gain just as much than the people that reach out do regarding our conversations. And I can tell you, as I took in the leap to become CEO of a company that I started after spending 20 years in high tech, I'm seeing so many people that are reaching out from 20 years ago, from 15 years ago, who are so excited about what I'm doing now and saying, wow, you helped me so much at this moment, at this moment, at this moment. And honestly, I don't remember every single moment. I just know that people aren't going to be reaching out unless they truly are inspired to do so. And so what I can tell everybody on, that's listening on this call, whatever you do it in as genuine as possible. Do it because you really, really want to do it, and no matter how big or how small it is, because I can guarantee you everything is returned in tenfold. And so when I think about the sponsorship of women, that's what I've been really focused on, because again, women of color, first in my family, it was very lonely. And so as I had opportunities to support others, I gave. And I think that's what we can all do, is just continue to help and be there. And if you can't, connecting with someone that can. The worst thing you can do is just ignore and think that it's going to go away, because just imagine putting yourselves in their shoes. So.
No, that's a good point too, Maria. I think that's very important. When you start to build those relationships, you can't take them for granted, right? It's very important to remember how you make people feel, because they certainly will. They will remember. You never know who may see you in that light and have to come back around. So I think that's very good input. Jamie, what do you feel like would be helpful in supporting women in the workplace?
Well, there's obviously amazing themes that we're all touching upon as we're answering these questions and going through our lived experiences. Certainly, again, that connection, that community is critical. I think oftentimes we overlook the simple tasks in terms of saying to someone, how can I support you? What does that look like to you? Opening that door and meaning it. Of course, during pre-COVID times, the door is always open. The door is always open. We knew that statement wasn't true, right? And so now entering into this new era of empowerment for women and making a point to say, there is no door. Come to me. Any question, no question is silly. This is a safe space. This is an area where I want to support you and your growth, and just voicing it externally, I think, is really powerful and brings this safety to situations that sometimes feel unsafe, right? People do not know how to navigate this oftentimes in their career. Also, having empathy, I think, goes so long and so far, right? When you're, really trying to create these connections and community and bringing this all together. So of course, double clicking on everything Rashida and Maria had mentioned in some of their comments, but I definitely think it's all about opening that conversation and, knocking down that door that was once there and saying, there is no door, right?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think my greatest takeaways from this question are community, which is very important, like you all touched upon, that mentorship again, and that empathy, Jamie, that you just mentioned, all very important. What do you feel most organizations are overlooking when it comes to hiring women in general? We'll start with you, Maria.
Oh, this is a great question. The simple fact of just not looking at the skills that each woman possess, we're so multidimensional.
Yes.
And that brings so much value into any organization. And unfortunately, we don't always have the opportunity to connect with people that can actually see much further than just the interview questions or the actual role they have in front of them. I think that's the biggest issue that most companies face, is that they're hiring for a particular role today versus thinking about what they will actually need in the future. And as a woman, I know, we're collaborative, we're, like Jamie said, empathetic. Empathy is what is needed in leadership today more than ever. It is probably the word that's used most, yet no one's really trained folks to be able to understand that piece of it. And as women, we bring, that's who we are, right? We do these things. So I think it's really taking the time to take inventory around what is actually needed in an organization and how women actually can bring that to an organization. And the more time companies spend just thinking about roles one for one versus looking at how skills can be transferred regardless of what roles they've had in the past or have not had, right? Especially we're thinking about women that have been home raising their families. I mean, come on, they have every title in the world. They're amazing. And how can we ensure that those skills are then transferred into the workplace? So it's going to require both strategy and also intentionality around how we ensure that roles actually can invite even more women to want to interview and apply, which is another piece of it, because that's another roadblock. So it's many different blocks that prevent companies attracting women, and then women actually applying, and then the companies actually seeing the women that apply to actually make that connection, because there's no secret here that we are all super amazing. So that's the point of view.
Maria, are you being biased? It's okay. It's okay. I agree though. I always say people who have families and like managing a household, that's project management. That's a great transferable skill. So very good point. Jamie, what do you feel most organizations are overlooking when it comes to hiring women?
Yeah, much of what Maria had mentioned resonates. I think it's the idea of evaluating the full self and the full experience of this individual, right? And being able to look beyond stereotypes, look beyond untraditional skill sets, and just kind of that checking the box. I also think there are huge opportunities in the recruitment process and the questions and the framing and the way in which we go about having these conversations and creating these opportunities. It needs a lot of improvement. I can tell just a quick story that happened to me after 15 years of experience. I was approached by an organization for an executive sales position, and the direct hiring manager, at that point, I had only spoken with men at the organization, which again, I'm pretty used to that in the IT technology landscape. And in the interview, the gentleman asked me, well, how strong are you? Really, how strong are you? And it was this moment that, just blew my mind, because of course, all these different responses. Well, how strong am I? I can lift weights. I can raise a family. I can progress professionally, into executive level roles, being the only woman, the only Latina. But it was just such an eye-opening experience, because there's bias even in the questions. That question would never get asked to a man. I'm sorry, it just wouldn't. And so I think it's important for organizations to reevaluate the way that they're going through the recruitment process, reevaluate the questions that they're asking, understanding that people absorb information differently, process information differently, come with a plethora of skill sets that might not be considered traditional, that would make them excel in roles, and just continue to do better so that we can open those channels and really provide opportunity for women.
Oh, that's really good points, Jamie, because I always like to stress the importance, if you really want to solve a problem and become transformative at an organization, it's important to look at those policies and practices, and even the matriculation of a woman and her cycle as a employee at your organization. What does that look like? What are they experiencing from the moment they look at your job descriptions to the moment they're actually filling out the application? What are the questions? Even once you're an employee, looking at the survey questions that might be presented throughout your time as an employee, I think is very important. Thank you for lifting that. Rashida, what do you think organizations are overlooking when they're hiring women?
So, because Maria and Jamie took all my answers, which is great, because it's the common thread, right?
Right.
And, so I would say, in addition to, empathy and the transferable skills, I would say I would partner emotional intelligence with empathy. And I feel like for a lot of women, we're typically pretty self-aware because, sometimes to a fault, right? Because we're always trying to recognize and manage our emotions so that we're not demonstrating any stereotypical behaviors, but I feel like that's an advantage because it helps helps us figure out how we can handle tough issues, right?
Right.
And so with that, I feel like there's behaviors like active listening. And I think Maria started off by talking about um, the collab, like how women tend to be more collaborative. And I feel like that's because too of the active listening that we do. And we really try to be open to other ideas and opinions and, really work together to solve the right problem, right? And I would put right in bold, the right problem, right? And so, yeah, I think all of that, everything that Maria and Jamie said, and then I would just add in the emotional intelligence piece and active listening as additional skills that sometimes can be overlooked.
No, very good points, Rashida. I think the emotional component that you just mentioned is very important in addition to, like you said, that active listening, that everybody that talks doesn't really have that skill to do the other part, which is listening, which is so important. So thank you for raising that as well. I can't believe our time is quickly coming to a close. So I'm going to try to end on this. What best practices or suggestions would you share with other organizations when it comes to recruiting, retaining, and developing women's talents? Jamie, share that with your response with us here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's multi-layered for sure. I think there's
Definitely.
many facets to it. Declaring your stance as an organization is key. Being consistent with your messaging, having it really illustrated with actual metrics, with actual performance-driven activities, being able to have internal clients articulate it in the same way, I think is so key. Also, the idea of providing resources and not just canned resources, customized resources that touch upon meaningful themes that we all know are being experienced. And of course, I know we mentioned mentorship, having formal mentorship programs. It seems like to this group that it comes to us all very naturally, right? Within our workplace, outside of our workplace. But I do think that it's critical for organizations to map out a formal framework for mentorship. And then, become a storyteller. Tell the story. Showcase the power of this work, because it will just, it will speak volumes. And so those are just some of the things I would like to highlight.
No, I like that. Storytelling is very important. That's some of what we're doing here today. I think that's a great idea to keep going. Rashida, what would you say or suggest when it comes to recruiting and retaining and developing women's talent in the workplace?
Yeah, so a lot of what Jamie said does align with my thoughts as well. I would say really paying attention to the employee experience at all levels, and even that experience includes from attracting, recruiting, right, then retaining, right, throughout the whole life cycle. And I feel like that's important, and that's what we've been doing. So I know a lot of organizations have, employee surveys. We talked a lot about ERGs, right? That's another avenue to kind of hear the voice of employees. And within CGI Federal, we just completed a cultural assessment that went a little bit deeper. We had our first state of inclusion survey, but also we had focus groups where we're really trying to listen and learn. And some of the insights that we gained from that were, yes, like, Jamie said, having a mentoring framework, we have one, but now we're looking at how can we make it more flexible, right? So if you want one-on-one or you want group mentoring, or we have reverse mentoring, you kind of pick from the menu of options. You pick what, resonates with you or whatever you need. Like I mentioned earlier, at whatever phase of your career you're at. And also too, we're just looking at how can we create new pathways to career progression and advancement. And, and that's looking at our ERG leaders too, like that's talent, right? That people are volunteering their time or raising their hand to say, hey, I want to help support creating more inclusive environments, and they're leaning into that. So how can we align that with some type of career advancement track too, as well? And apprenticeship programs and partnerships with organizations like Scholas, right? Those are the things that we're looking at, and I think are some best practices that I would recommend.
Thank you. I agree with all of those, especially partnering with Scholas. Absolutely. Jamie, Rashida, Maria, you have all been tremendous Women's Futures Month Roundtable guests this afternoon. And before we head on out, I want Maria for you to share what you feel like would be helpful for organizations in recruiting and retaining and developing women talent.
Thank you, Omoanatse. I would just say organizations need to be ready. So for all the organization leaders that are out there, be ready to actually welcome amazing women into your organization, which for me, that means that ensure your managers are ready to be great managers for these women, because women don't leave companies, they leave managers. And so when we think about the organizational piece is, I like to tell folks, don't waste someone's time. Like if you're not truly ready to allow them to come bring their full selves to work, don't get them excited about coming to a place that is not going to be congruent to what you're saying is actually going to be their experience. And so be properly ready, get your workout in, do the hygiene, do it all that's needed, because women are just waiting to join amazing organizations to do amazing work. That's it. Let's cut everything else out. And that also ensures that the organizations are taking the responsibility to be ready to offer those environments, which connects right back to what I said earlier, the managers. We have to ensure managers know how to manage. And so as we're thinking about the organizations, this goes from hiring to then retaining to then progressing talent, because hiring is just one piece of the equation. The most important piece is us actually retaining the talent. And the third piece is actually growing and giving opportunities to actually do more in organizations. So that's what I would leave as my 3 points, especially as I'm, spearheading my company and focusing on what we could do. Is that's top priority, because there's no time to be thinking about let's hire, and then having women leave because the cultures aren't there to actually support them, and the efforts are just going out the window with them. So retention is key, and that requires manager readiness and also willingness to be there and be the managers that will retain talent.
Oh, very good, Maria. Yeah, I agree. I like to do a play on words, and I tell people, if you build a positive work culture, they will come. If you build it, they will come. So thank you. Thank you all for sharing your perspectives, your guidance, and your passion with all of us. But just because our time together is coming to an end doesn't mean the work stops. There are many ways to get involved and fuel women's futures. First, consider Scholas Women Talent to fill technology position vacancies. Our graduates embody a plethora of technical skills, from IT support to Java development, software engineering to cybersecurity and beyond. They're ready to make a difference on the job day one. Second, you can commit to a 30-minute call to learn more about Scholas Enterprise Talent Solutions. Our talent architects are your partners in building a sustainable tech talent pipeline. And finally, get more involved with Scholas Diverse by Design. Get in touch by emailing diversebydesign@perscolas.org. It has been an honor to serve you today as your host, and I thank you for your interest and commitment to create more women tech futures. Join us this fall for our Hispanic Future Month Roundtable. More details to come soon. Thank you and enjoy your day.